So, hi guys, I'm Corrine Bromfield. I am the swine extension veterinarian at the University of Missouri. And when Dr. Becton and I sat down to kind of figure out who's going to talk about what in this particular presentation, I mentioned that, you know, in Missouri, if people haven't heard about the Secure Pork Supply Plan, they probably haven't heard me open my mouth. Because that's a lot of what I talk about lately, because I really see this as a place where we can be better prepared, or we can kind of, I don't want to say circle the wagons exactly, but we can have some idea of what we need to do. We have some idea of what our enhanced biosecurity needs to be, and we can potentially do that before the disease gets here. Right? So every day that we don't have a secure pork supply plan is one day closer to a potential issue. And okay, all right, I'm probably the world's biggest procrastinator. There's a presentation I'm giving tomorrow that's not quite finished yet, but I still have 24 hours, guys. I've got 24 hours. So I know the feeling of, okay, I'm going to do it when I need to do it, right? But sometimes we run into the disease is already here and I've lost my chance to do it when I need to do it. And I might be behind the 8 ball. So I think we're going to split this about 30 minutes. And like I said before, I could talk about the Secure Pork Supply Plan probably till all of you guys have gone deaf. I will have lost my voice far before then. But we're going to try and keep it to a half an hour. And somebody can feel free to come up and kick me off stage if I keep talking. So Secure Pork Supply Plan and RAB app is kind of the areas where I'm going to focus. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Becton and she'll pick it up on the rest of the presentation. So who hasn't heard about the Secure Pork Supply Plan being a voluntary business continuity program? A pre-outbreak preparedness situation. Good, I see no hands, that's fantastic. So it's this voluntary pre-outbreak preparedness situation. It's a way for us to go through, see what's on the farm, see what our plan needs to be, see what things we're ready for, see what actions we need to take. And so within that pre-outbreak preparedness, we need to know what is our biosecurity on farm, what is our potential for increasing our biosecurity if that needs to happen? What surveillance do we have on farm? Do we have traceability? And all of those things go together so that we can therefore, movement permit guidance, I've got that up there. So if we want to be able to move animals in a situation when there's a disease in the United States that we previously did not have and we are concerned about, we still have some guidance in that situation. So I could therefore take my information and send it to the state animal health official and say, hey, I am not a risky situation right now. Here's the reasons why I'm not a risky situation. Because I have my enhanced biosecurity, because I have my map that has my line of separation, because I am already doing all of these surveillance things on my farm, so I can show you the data that says that we don't have this disease here. And if that, all of that makes me a low risk, if I'm a low enough risk, then I can probably move those animals at the right time when I need to. So all of those are risk assessments. They all go together in that plan. So, foreign animal disease in the United States. All right. There's 3 big foreign animal diseases that we're worried about in pigs. One is African swine fever. One is foot and mouth disease. One is classical swine fever. Well, we've had classical swine fever and we've had foot and mouth disease here before, and we have eradicated them. So that gives me hope, right? But also, we've got a completely different system. We have completely different farms from when we had those diseases here before. So those foreign animal diseases that we're somewhat concerned about, they have a plan that the federal government is going to take once we see them. If they cross our borders, if they make it into the United States, there's a plan for them. And that plan is a fairly large overarching plan, right? It doesn't include my particular farm. There's not pages in this book that says, okay, well, Corrine Bromfield's farm, we're going to do this. But instead, it has information in there about, well, okay, if we have the disease in the United States, first of all, we need to figure out where it is. So we're going to have to stop things for a moment so that we can figure out where it is. And so that might be, Corey Bromfield's farm might get inserted there because maybe Corey Bromfield's farm is the place that has the disease. God, I hope not. Because I'm sure that if my farm is the one that has the disease, people are going to be, Bromfield, that one, don't know if I should trust her. As of right now, I don't have my own pigs at home because of biosecurity reasons. It makes it really hard for me to go to somebody else's pigs. But the plan is to stop and figure out where everything is. Once we figure out where things are, then we can make some decisions about what we can do next. Do we have so much disease that we need to start depopulating? Do we have a small enough amount of disease that we can actually get it under control really quickly? That would be fantastic. But so this guidance is sort of that big overarching guidance. So I see a couple faces in here that probably are fairly familiar with these. And I have some other faces that maybe don't, sit down and read the red book for, light bedtime reading. I haven't read it as bedtime reading. It'll put you to sleep pretty quickly, but, you do want to actually know what's going on in there instead of falling asleep halfway through. But that's the plan. So what happens when it comes to a farm? Has anybody experienced a foreign animal disease investigation? That's really good. Not seeing any hands. So a foreign animal disease investigation. If we think that there might be that disease on a farm, what are the consequences of incorrectly deciding yes or no the disease is there or not there? So if we incorrectly say that we don't have a disease there, then potentially it can get moved around, right? Because we're not going to take any additional precautions if we don't think the disease is there. So that's a pretty big deal. But also, what are the consequences of saying, yes, we do think it's there, if it's really not? What happens if we get a disease in the United States that we've not seen before? So first and foremost, we're going to get a lot of stop movement because we've got to figure out where this disease is. But secondly, why do we care so much about it? Do we have other diseases in the United States? I wouldn't be a veterinarian if we didn't have other diseases in the United States. That's my bread and butter, right? I deal with PEDV, I deal with PRRS, I deal with E. coli, I deal with salmonella. Those are day-to-day things. We have these diseases in the barn, so why do we care so much about these other diseases that don't happen to be here right now? Well, a lot of them are trade limiting. So trade limiting disease, if we get it in the United States and it's going to stop our ability to trade, there's a couple things that I remember really well from my days in animal science. One, pork is a sell it or smell it business, right? If I can't get it sold, it's going to go bad, or it's got to go into cold storage. Well, I'm one of those people that, I think pigs are really amazing. They're amazing animals alive, and they are delicious dead. So, oh my gosh. I mean, right now, I'm standing here, I can smell that bacon. And I'm trying to decide, really, how important is it for me to finish this talk, or should I just go get that bacon now? So I don't want to see any waste there, but also it's a business, right? And so how many pigs get exported? So about 25% of the pigs that are produced in the United States, or 25% of the pork that's produced in the United States, goes somewhere else. Well, if we get one of these diseases, it can't go anywhere else. It's going to have to stay here. And that changes things for us. I mean, I'm happy to try to eat more bacon. But I'm probably already eating almost the maximum amount of bacon that one person can consume. If I sneeze, bacon may come out my nose at this point. So I probably can't take on any more myself, but maybe we'll have some more options in the United States. But so it's concerning if we accidentally say that the disease is here and it's not. A lot of people are going to stop buying pork from us. So we don't want to do that. And we also don't want to miss it if it's here. So if we end up with a foreign animal disease or a questionable foreign animal disease, something that might possibly be it, we're going to stop everything. in that area. We're going to quarantine that area. We're going to set up a control zone. And we're going to test and try and figure out whether or not that disease is here. So if it turns out that the disease is here, within that control zone, we've got areas of, these are definitely infected premises. Around that, we have surveillance areas to make sure that we don't see the disease escaping. But if you are within that control zone, and you are therefore affected by the disease, but not infected by the disease, if you've got a secure pork supply plan, you can probably apply for a permit and be able to move your animals, or at least have some business continuity from those premises. So those movement permits are likely going to be required for all movements off of premises during an outbreak, surrounding an outbreak, following an outbreak. And officials are going to need to balance the risk of allowing live animal movement because, okay, so I can stand up here and say, hey, don't move your animals. Who's weaning twice a week? Anybody weaning once a week? Couple hands. So if I said, hey, you can't move your animals for the next 2 weeks, got a place to put all those animals that would have moved? Do you have a way to feed those animals? Do you have a way to get them water? So if we're not infected by the disease, we need some ability to continue to do that. And so balancing the risk of moving that disease with things like, animal welfare, business continuity, the ability to maintain some level of normalcy is really important. So our components of the Secure Pork Supply Plan, remember it's voluntary, but the three major components are biosecurity, surveillance, and traceability. So biosecurity, what is biosecurity? Well, it's those set of practices designed to prevent the introduction and spread of diseases onto a farm. It's designed to minimize the spread of disease. And so I assume that most people in here, if you're raising some pigs, you've got a level of biosecurity on that farm. So that biosecurity may be that the people who come to the farm haven't been to other farms in the past 24 hours, or maybe it's 72 hours. Perhaps your biosecurity includes Danish entry, where you change your shoes and you put on some coveralls and you put on boots that are dedicated to the farm. Or maybe it's even higher than that and you actually have to get your shower as you're going into the farm. So all of that is designed to minimize the additional diseases coming in. And that's our regular biosecurity. In the case of an outbreak, we're going to be expected to have enhanced biosecurity. We're going to have to step it up a little bit. Because in the event of having a foreign animal disease, we've got a different situation on the farm, or a different situation in the US. So our biosecurity plan, our biosecurity section of the Secure Pork Supply Plan, includes having a biosecurity manager, somebody who knows this farm and who knows what's going on at this farm. So I have 2 farms at the University of Missouri that I work with on a fairly routine basis. I know where the entrances and exits are to the parking lot from the main road. I know where they need to have their feed delivered. I know these things, so that way I can help them set up a plan that takes that into account. If I'm setting up a plan for a farm that I don't know, I may say, well, let's set up a line of separation that nobody crosses except for at this one disinfection site, and we'll just have you auger the feed over that so the feed truck never has to come on the farm. Well, that might not work if your farm is set up where those feed hoppers are far into your line of separation. And if nobody has, an auger arm that is that far, we may need to do something a little bit different to make sure that we're doing this in a way that actually does minimize the spread of disease. So biosecurity on paper can be really fantastic, but if it's not something that we can do, then it's not going to stop things from coming into our farm. So I really love it when the students hand me, when I ask them for a presentation or I ask them for a project, like set up a biosecurity plan for this farm. So they hand me 40 pages that say we're going to do this, this, and this. As soon as we get out to the farm, they're like, oh, well, step 1 was that we were actually supposed to take a shower in our cars because maybe our cars are contaminated. That way we're going to clean out the car and we're going to step onto the farm, we won't be contaminated. What? Anybody have a shower in their car? Anybody figure out a way to set that one up? Well, okay, great. On paper, the biosecurity plan is actually kind of weird, but will work. But it's not something that I can do. Okay, well, if I can't do it, I'm not going to do it. So if the biosecurity on paper works, but I can't actually practically do it, then the biosecurity doesn't work in this situation. So we need a biosecurity manager and a written site-specific plan for that location, that site-specific plan. We need a defined perimeter buffer area, which is the area outside of the line of separation that helps to minimize pathogen load at the line of separation. And we need a defined line of separation. And the line of separation is something that the farm can control. That the farm can control what is going over that line of separation. So if you've got hogs indoors, line of separation is the walls of your building. Because I can guarantee you nothing's coming through that part of the wall, right? And I can control that. If I've got hogs outdoors, maybe my line of separation is a fence that I can control. But I might need a bigger perimeter buffer area because I can't exactly control that there are going to be no birds coming over my fence. So we need that site-specific biosecurity plan, and that plan needs to explain how the site meets the biosecurity measures listed on the checklist. If you haven't been to securepork.org, that is where you can go to get the basics, the outline of a secure pork supply plan. And you'll fill that in, and that is the checklist to make sure that you know what's going on. So every site needs a line of separation, needs a perimeter buffer area, needs to make one of these maps. Who sat down and made one of these maps? Oh, good, I got some hands. So that someone else can look at this and knows where the line of separation is, knows where the perimeter buffer area is, knows how they could appropriately follow that plan. And there's 169 spots in the secure pork supply plan of places where you need to fill in what you're doing. 169. That's at least a good afternoon of sitting down and filling that out, yeah? At least. So we've also got traceability and surveillance that go into our biosecurity plan. But traceability is, where our animals came from and where they're going. So we need a Prem ID, we need a PIN. Most of the pork industry has done a really good job of making sure that they've got their pins and making sure that it actually goes to the location of where their pigs are. If you've got any questions with that, there are places that we can go to verify that so that that pin tells whoever is going to be making those permitting decisions where those animals are held. Whoops. And then we need to make sure that we have records. We have records of where the animals go. We have records of where the animals came from. We have records of people who have been on our farm, where they've come from before. And we need to be able to track these from site to site. And obviously, electronic records are preferred in a situation like this because if we're talking about biosecurity, one of the main risks of biosecurity is a new human walking onto a farm. I am a biosecurity risk. Also, at the university, I'm usually a walking Title IX violation. That's a completely different thing, but I am a risk, right? Every new person that comes onto that farm, that's why we've got the maintaining of a visitor logbook being really important. So if I want to share those records with somebody who's going to be making a permitting decision, if I can send them to them over the internet, or I can send them in an email, or I can fax them if I have to, that is one fewer risk, one fewer person coming onto the farm to get those documents, right? And it's a lot faster and easier. If somebody in Columbia needs to come down to Springfield to say, yes, your documents are good, that's extra time, that's extra risk, and it might slow down a large number of other things. And the last part of our secure pork supply plan would include surveillance. So knowing what's going on the farm. So having people that are on the farm that know what to look for in terms of disease. What's a normal level of mortality for our farm? What are some of the normal expected symptoms that we see on the farm? So do we have things outside of those parameters? African swine fever. One of the big things that we see in African swine fever is high temperatures, high fevers. So getting in the barn daily and training people to, if you see a pig that looks sick, go ahead and get its temperature. So we have some data saying, okay, when our pigs are sick, they tend to be low fevers, or wow, our pig just got sick and he's got a fever of 107. That's out of our normal parameters. And so we want to look for these parameters and clinical signs on a daily basis. Additionally, under surveillance, I have included up here a little heads up for the certified sampler training or certified sampler program. So in the event of needing permitted movement, having a certified sampler on farm is someone who can collect those samples that we need to prove that the disease isn't on the farm. They won't take the place of a foreign animal disease investigator, but they'll be there so that we can have one fewer biosecurity risk in the event that we need samples taken for permitted movement. And so after talking about the secure pork supply plan, I'm kind of dovetailing a little bit into RAB, Rapid Access Biosecurity Application. So when we talk about the secure pork supply plan, okay, I'm asking that each farm keep their own electronic records of what animals came to their farm, what animals are leaving their farm, how often this happens, how many times it happens, thank you. I'm asking that they sit down and they fill out all 169 sections of that biosecurity plan. I'm asking that they sit down and they create that map. And that is something that I think that a lot of people can do, but also, who has the time? Right? So RAB is one way that we can assist with that. So RAB is a program that has been set up to study the disease transmission and routes of disease in different areas. And that will help us to understand where disease might move if we had an outbreak. It also includes, oh my goodness. Well, I think you can see the RAB portion of that. I'm not sure that you can see the rest of the words that are on that page. But what do you do with your plan? How do you get your plan approved? Well, RAB is one way that you can get it into an electronic format, and you can get it so that the state can see it, so that the right veterinarians, the right state animal health official can see it at the right time. So with RAB, what you're going to do is you're going to call me, you're going to call my office, and you're going to say, hey, we need some help putting together our secure pork supply plan and getting this into RAB. And we're going to sit down with you and we're going to ask you those questions, those 169 questions. And most of it you already are doing every day. You just don't maybe have it written down. So you answer those questions, it gets put into RAB. Once it's in RAB, we'll get all those 169 fields, and the program itself will spit back when there's a question. When there's a problem, when it's, okay, well, what's your biosecurity? If you said that your line of separation is the pond, well, do you have a moat around the facility? So if you said pond and the computer's like, nah, nope, I don't like that, it's going to send it back so that we can help figure out what's the actual thing going on here. It will also then help to make that map in a format that is shareable when you decide you want it to be shared. So all of this information is yours. All of this information is saved in the RAB app, and it's not shareable unless you are giving that permission. But RAB app is a nice, easy way to create those electronic records. It's a nice, easy way, once you've told it, hey, every week I sell my pigs to Bromfield Swine Farm, and every Thursday morning this happens, it can be set up to just automatically pull that information. So you don't have to go in and try and fill out when your animals are moving, what's happening. It just pulls that for you. So it's all together. So let's say something happens in 6 months and you need to be able to get some permanent movement. Well, look, I've got all this data that shows where my animals go, where they came from. I've also got all this data that shows that I don't have the disease, that I'm taking all these appropriate enhanced biosecurity steps, and I can therefore apply for my permit fairly easily. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I do have one more thing up here. Thank you very much to the National Pork Board for a lot of the pictures that I used in the Secure Pork Supply Plan part of the presentation, as well as thank you to NC State. They're the lab that has actually done the computer work to put together RAB app. So If you have any questions, I'll be turning it over to Dr. Becton at this point. Got a question over here.
How do I know my electronic information is secure?
How do you know that the electronic information is secure? So the way that the electronic information, or the way that RAB app is designed, is so that it is secure. They also, because it's essentially held with North Carolina State, they have confidentiality agreements that are set up so that the information is not foiable, and that is something that you would get. You would get that confidentiality agreement before you go into it, so that you can read and see how all of that is set up. It is designed so that each of the farms has access to their own information, and it's only shareable on your say-so. But if you're trying to get that permitted movement, you're going to want to be sharing that information at that time. But that's a very good question, because obviously this is not something that you want sitting on the internet somewhere where someone can go, oh, what's Bromfield doing right now? Oh my gosh, look at Bromfield Swine Farm. Good Lord, she does some really weird things. She's got this weird biosecurity. Wow, it's right at that location. Man, I could go find that. We don't want any of that happening, obviously. So with those confidentiality agreements, and it's not sitting on the internet. It's sitting in a database that is not foiable. Thank you for that question. Other questions? Well, I will hang around after, and also take it away, Dr. Becton.
Thank you. All right. Well, I want to say it's nice to be back in Missouri. I haven't been here to the Show Me State in a couple of years. I used to live here, well, back in the early 2000s. So anyway, it's good to be back. So thank you for the invitation to come and talk to you guys about some of our producer tools. And so today I'm going to cover things that we're working on at the Pork Board, but also a project that you guys have probably heard about, the Swine Health Improvement Project or Plan. And I'll say right up front, I'm not actually the expert on SHIP, but I am going to cover some of the basics. I will have contact information. I know there are several folks here, Bill Pittenger's here, that can also provide more information. But what I want to do is try to tie some of these things together, because there's a lot of tools that we have, and while a lot of it may be kind of really daunting of all these different programs and actions, we're trying to get together so that when we come to the event of a foreign animal disease, while we're in the heat of the moment, we're not trying to do all these things of finding records, of gathering information, of sharing data, because hopefully we'll have all that done ahead of time. This is just a picture of basically a control area, control room, when we did exercises back in 2019. This was actually in Maryland at the USDA office. They were kind of the command and control center. But we want to do these exercises and get these plans together, because again, the last thing you want to do when you're in the heated battle is to try to get all these things together. We want to be prepared. And so this circle you've probably seen, it's kind of a concept of what happens and how things get classified. It's an idea. So when you're looking at, I'm afraid to touch these buttons. Okay. So when you're looking at, the red is not a good thing. So these would be farms that are actually designed as positive, or that's the first positive farm. So then a red zone is created around these positive farms, basically saying that this area is our control area. We've identified positive herds. We've got to have specific things that go on. Dr. Bromfield talked about the red book. That comes into play when you're coming into this red zone. And also these other farms of how we do surveillance, how we do quarantine, how we shut them down. But what comes in when we talk about secure pork supply are some of these farms that are in the zone but maybe not positive. Because those non-positive farms are the ones that we want to protect and be able to move pork, move pigs, be able to still have business continuity even if you're in the timeout zone in the red box. And so that's, sometimes some people I think get a little confused about what we're doing, but secure pork is designed to help any of these farms that are in these red zones and surveillance zones still be able to go about your normal business after we get through the initial phase. And then as we get into it later, we're going to be looking at SHIP. SHIP is actually going to be something that's working in these green zones of looking at how do we identify and prove that we don't have these diseases like ASF. So that's just a little bit of conceptually what we're looking at. And so this picture really is one of when we did our exercises, and it's pretty in-depth. Now these are just some schematics, but everybody's got, like, we've got a little village built here along with packing, our farms, feed mills, and folks are walking through an exercise. And as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts. And so if we can combine, consolidate what we're doing to address those moving parts, we're all better off. And so what are some of the things that we can do to help that? Well, one of them is looking at AgView. AgView is something that is producer dollar driven, so this is something that Pork Checkoff has funded, but really what we're looking at is trying to create a database that can gather and aggregate this important data, but also more importantly be able to visualize it and transmit that to the folks that are in the know that need it. Because for example, if we got a positive, heaven forbid, here in Missouri, the producer would need to be able to transfer information and data about their farm, their movements, their premises, who's affected, to Dr. Struberg's office and say, here's what's going on, this is how we need to manage it. And so AgView is one of those tools that can do that. It does really do well in tracing pigs, but it also can grab a lot of information, so your secure pork supply plans, your diagnostic data, and have it all in one location. And that's I kind of call the beauty of the madness. And so again, what this does is take a lot of these paper data pieces and put them into electronic form and make it a lot quicker to get to the people that need to make decisions. Because even during our exercises in 2019, there was a lot of things that we realized that, holy cow, we don't have in electronic form. And there's still a lot of people doing, paper certificates of movement. They're doing paper movement records. And then how do you convert that paper to electronic data securely that then can be visualized? And that's what AgView is really set out to do. And so what are things, I talk about visualization, what does that mean? So this picture, it's a little bit bled out, but really what AgView does, it gives us a common picture to work off of. And normally this is a map, or it should be a map, but what it does is takes all these data points and says, okay, maybe this is a positive farm, and we can see everywhere any pigs have moved out of that point. And that's huge, because when I was in production, and we had everything by paper, so we had to gather all the data, draw the dots. We had pins and 8x10 color glossy photos on a big whiteboard trying to figure out where the heck everything went. And that was all for one pseudorabies false positive. If I had had this database then, I could have determined that in 30 minutes and we all would have been, out going to bleed the herd, and it would have been a done deal. But AgView can allow you to do this in a very quick amount of time and have accurate information available. And so that's something that we're really, really excited about. But the other thing, that last point, it can be used for other diseases. We've had a lot of 144 PRRS going around in the industry, kind of wreaking havoc in the upper Midwest. Now that we've heard APP is also very hot. And so this system can also be used for non-foreign animal diseases. So this is not just a tool for FADs. So if you have, again, in your system, you're having an AgView account and you're looking at all your movements, you can actually determine, all right, if I had a farm break with PRRS, where did all those pigs go? Where'd the weaners go? Where'd the finishers go? Where'd the gilts come from? How do we address each of those additional risk points? And then you can go back and trace where things may have gone wrong. And that's a huge deal in either foreign animal disease or domestic disease management. And so other disease applications, we've talked about emerging diseases, foreign animal diseases, but it can be used in regional control products or projects. But then I've got highlighted really for use for secure pork supply, and that's a lot what we're talking about. Because it can also have in AgView that, yep, a producer that's enrolled in AgView and enrolled in secure pork or signed up for secure pork, yep, we've got all this data, we can send it off to the needed authorities if we have an outbreak. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And so all of these different points, AgView really is the center database system, but it ties pig movements, it looks at the different software partners for movement production data. It can gather data prior to an incident, holds it securely, and then also sends it where it needs to go. And so the nice thing about AgView, it really is an aggregator tool to get all these disparate pieces of information, get it into one spot, and get it out to where it needs, with the goal being reduce the time it takes to make critical decisions on permitting, on quarantines, on traceability and traceback. If we can shorten that time for foreign animal disease, hopefully we can shut down a foreign animal disease really, really quickly. But the same could be said with shutting down a PRRS break or PED break. And so, like I said, I'm pretty passionate about this because had I had this system years ago, holy cats, Katie bar the door, because it would have been on with us trying to track and manage all of our systems. I think we could have been just that much more effective. And so, anyway, that's just a really quick overview on AgView. There's the email on the bottom, but there's also some contacts in the end. I'll get to you guys. So who else is playing in the game? And don't ask me to say what API means because I'm terrible with acronyms. Basically, API is a programming interface. And so what that does, it allows AgView and gives the permissions and having the operating systems to work with these different partners. So MetaFarms, Pork Vet Solutions, Delphax, Trace First, there's many, many more. But these are the groups that right now we have permission to talk about, that the operating systems between AgView and these groups, they're seamless interaction. So you can download information, have access to information, pull it without having to worry about the different databases not being able to interface. And so that's really exciting to have that. The other one that's coming is, again, additional partners that we're working on, such as Global Vet Link. Obviously, RAB app's a key one that we've got in here, PigChamp, Iowa State, a lot of the diagnostic labs. So again, trying to build these seamless connections that this database can pull any information out of there and have that information available during a disease outbreak. And so that's really, really critical. This slide, again, a lot of the colors are bled out, and I apologize for that. But really what it's showing is a lot of these states that are in green are states that are participating in some degree or another, whether they've had a demonstration, that they're under demonstration, or they're fully online. So really most of the major hog producing states, and you can see some of the demographics and stats, this changes because we're continuing to get more farms enrolled or creating accounts, but we've got 25 of the state animal health organizations or officials basically on board with using AgView. And so that's a big thing because y'all, the state level are so important. Without that, it doesn't go forward. We've got over 5,000 premises, 1,900 movements, 68,000 total movements are entered, and more is coming online every day. And so we're just gaining more and more comfort in the system being able to do what it says it's going to do. And so that's a key thing. So to take a little bit of a step back, I wanted to talk about SHIP. I don't know, how many of you have heard about the Swine Health Improvement Plan? Just a couple. Okay. Well, that's a good thing, so that's why I'm here to talk about it. Really, it's a plan to demonstrate how can we look at preserving and protecting the health of our swine herds. And this is modeled off of poultry. Poultry is doing this. It's called the National Poultry Improvement Plan, poultry. But they have been involved and enrolled in that really mainly from high path avian influenza or even low path. But poultry producers are pretty much online and in board, and they test all of their birds prior to them going to slaughter. And if they test positive, they don't go, and then the herd or flock gets quarantined and depopulated. So there's a group out of Iowa State that got together different collaborators and said, let's look at this. And so we've got folks from South Dakota State, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Minnesota going together to run this pilot project that's been funded by USDA. And so what's its intent? What's it going to do? It really wants to set up a playbook of how do you develop standards that people can incorporate and abide by to really have a uniform approach to disease. And really this is disease freedom. So we want to be able to prove that, yep, we don't have ASF. And so we can show our trading partners and marketing partners that, yes, these herds are free of disease and they follow a certain biosecurity standards and other standards that says we are doing what we said we're doing. And so this, again, is where, if you remember that ring I showed you, this plan would work in that green zone. It's not for the control areas and it's not for the yellow surveillance. It's really for those free areas. And so that's kind of how all of these plans come together, and it's really important. And so the pilot had their first delegate meeting last August, it was, and there was, I think, 230 delegates. It was done in Des Moines. Everybody got together to look at what are the needed things that we need to do for this pilot, so developing resolutions. And so that was a big one, is to come to the business of the plan and say, here's the things that we need to get done. And everybody on the delegate group said, yep, we do, and everything's moving ahead. And so there's a widespread agreement on this plan. So the highlighted states really show who is involved. And so essentially it's just about all of our swine states. So 28 major states have agreed to have some degree of participation, have delegates that are present, and really want this to move ahead. And so it covers roughly 99% of U.S. swine production, at least the production states. And so what does this mean, or what's going to happen? Again, this is voluntary. This is not a mandatory program. It is voluntary, but it's working with producers, packers, veterinarians to develop these standards and get these things into place. It also has got to work with our state animal health officials as well as USDA, because right now we can't do routine testing for ASF. It's got to be on sick animals or suspect animals. And so there's a lot of those things in the works. But what do participants need to do? Basically enroll, start to look at the requirements, have the ability to verify compliance, and I'll get into how that's going. But premise level certification is what's going to happen. This isn't going to be just a broad brush. It'll be on each of the premises that participate. And the diseases right now we're looking at is African swine fever and CSF classical swine fever. So what are the requirements? And these are still being worked on. But basically it's a voluntary enrollment. It's going to have a valid VCPR, a client relationship with a veterinarian. So that's important because PQA needs that as well. There will be biosecurity standards, and those are under development with their technical working groups, and a lot of that is from that delegate meeting. There's traceability standards, but again, a lot of this is very core to what you're doing now. So PIN numbers, demographic information on farms, so nothing new required. And then there will be surveillance testing, and that's also under development because, like I said, a lot of our testing right now, we can't, as producers and veterinarians, just go out and rotely test like a slaughter plant. We can't just pull samples and then turn them in. We have to have a reason to test for ASF or CSF, and so those things are being developed. But that's not stopping the process. Because we are getting things through these different working groups to develop those standards. So what next? Well, there is going to be a certifying state at the state level, or certifying state agency. And so there will be funding to look at how is that done, because there's a lot of questions. A lot of people are running off of, reduced state funding. COVID really kicked us all in the pants because of our taxes and income and other things that weren't coming in. And so we're working with the folks that are in the SHIP project, working with MPPC as well as USDA to look at what's the overall operating budget for a plan such as this, because we've got to have the budget to make it succeed. And so the official office that's dealing with it will administer the different certification standards, look at the verification and validation, and then maintain that list of participants. That's also something that could be incorporated into AgView, because if you're in US SHIP as well as Secure Pork, that can all be listed together, and when you pull up your AgView account, everything's cool, I'm all in. And so how does this work together with Pork Board? And since I'm from Pork Board, I have to bring it up. We're working very closely with SHIP on a lot of our other different projects. Dr. Bromfield mentioned the sampler testing, the certified sampler collection. That's a huge one because, again, having people on farm that are already there being certified to pull up samples is a huge deal because, again, you don't have to bring anybody in from the outside. You don't have to schedule it. They don't have to have downtime, biosecurity. You already got people on the farm, and that's a huge deal. There's the certified sampler training materials are actually housed in Secure Pork Supply website. I know that's a mouthful, but that's where those resources are housed. They've got very quick videos. They've got a one-pager on how to do it, and then also how to go through and work with a veterinarian on training. So they're really good training materials. Traceability, as always, that's going to be a huge one within biosecurity, and then having Secure Pork Supply as far as the biosecurity plans, all of that can be tagged and accessed by AgView. So here's some contact information, and I put up for AgView Dr. Patrick Webb. He's one of my counterparts. He's also a veterinarian with the National Pork Board. And he's been extensively involved in AgView and its development, down to even working with the contract Accenture company that does all the programming. But he's very, very familiar with a lot of the inner workings of response for foreign animal diseases, and so I've got his email there. And then also, as far as Pork Checkoff, our website of where you can go to specifically find the AgView sign up, but develop an account. So that link is there. And then lastly, I also have SHIP's contact, because if you have any more specific questions on U.S. SHIP, that's the website to go to. Like I said, Mr. Bill Pittenger has handouts or things on SHIP if you want additional information, as well as Secure Pork Supply, that can lead you through some of the things that are happening with SHIP and what's going to happen. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. What questions do you have for me? I know it's a lot of information, and anytime people talk about databases, I tend to get cross-eyed. But yes, sir.
Is there a cost to be involved or participate with AgView?
There is not. This is funded by producer dollars, so it is your dollars that work for you, and there is no cost, and as well as that computer support. So our programmers have been very, very helpful, because if you get into there and you're like, what the heck is this? How do I go through these fields? We've got people basically standing by to help you through that and help you understand and even to enroll. The nice thing with AgView, when we first started, you had to enroll each and every farm individually. If you had multiple farms, even if it was under one company, you still had to go through every single one. We've now adjusted the system where if you have multiple farms and you have one person that's managing those, that person can have their own separate account to be able to put hands and fingers on the management of those farms. So now you don't have to go and have to deal with each and every one individually. So we're trying to do this as a real-time learning. What we started out with is not what we're going to end up with, because as you all get involved and active and a lot of people get into this, we're finding things that are either clunky, they're not correct as far as our assumptions on farms, and we're making very pointed efforts to get that changed. So, and we'll probably be at Expo too, so if you ever get a chance to get up to World Pork Expo in June, I know we'll probably have folks there working on that.
He's over there.
Yes, sir. Oh, yes. I'll get you, Nick.
Is there a need, or are people already doing biosecurity audits? Because to her point earlier about having a different plan, is there something taking place to make sure that the biosecurity plans that are in place will actually be effective or be carried out?
Right now, the question was, are there biosecurity audits that are in place for all of these different programs? The only thing that I know that's actually doing an audit is through PQA, and that is working when you do the common swine industry audit. As far as the actual specific biosecurity audit for secure pork, or even looking at SHIP down the road, there is not currently. That is something that we do have checklists available that if you are going through, you can just say, oh, okay, here I'm in the farm today, let's just check these things off. But right now, there is the only formal audit I know is through the CSA thing, through PQA. So, I think, sir, you had.
I was just going to add, in Missouri, we're relying on accredited veterinarians to maybe conduct or consult on such an audit.
Yep, that's a great point. Yes, sir.
When was AgView rolled out? Was it a hard launch date, or was it rolled out soft?
There was a little bit of a soft rollout, but the actual hard date rollout was last November, or it was actually November 8th, I think, of 2021, if I recall correctly. And so we did the hard rollout, and then we did a really big push at Expo, and then have just really kind of gained momentum since then. Can't see. Yes, sir. Sorry. Sure. Mm-hmm.
What's the strategy or plan that's being discussed for, in terms of if you find it feral in the U.S. or Canada or something?
Yes. how do we deal with feral swine? That is the question, unfortunately, for the ages, and I wish I had an easy answer. We've had extensive amount of talks about that because obviously in the United States, and I know here in Missouri and where I'm at in North Carolina, we've got a lot of feral swine. And so it's on the radar for USDA. There is some sampling that's going on, and they're looking at how to assess those. I don't know if anybody has sat down and said this is what we're going to do to try to eradicate them, because we know it's a huge deal. USDA has, and they've had for several years, about a $26 million bump in funding to look at feral swine management and eradication. I haven't looked at their updates lately, but that is one thing I know they're looking at. Now, another example in the Caribbean, where we know we've got ASF in both the Dominican Republic and Haiti, the USDA has made a concerted effort to go into adjacent country, Puerto Rico, and go and look at their feral swine population. And right now there's an extensive operation to basically depopulate that group of pigs. Some of those countries are going to be, it's going to be very difficult, at least in DR and Haiti, because right now most of their pigs are backyard populations that really don't have borders. A lot of the feeding and the management of the pigs is underway by going to garbage feeding. And so at least Dominican Republic is trying to reassess how they're handling. Haiti right now is very, very uncontrolled because there's not a lot of solid management that can be done, both for country and security reasons and just lack of infrastructure. But I wish I had a better answer for feral swine. It's on our radar, but I think everybody's still trying to think, holy cats, what do we do? The one other thing I will say is we've worked with the National Pork Producers Council because they're working on what's called the zone of protection and trying to create that zone. And so at least for Puerto Rico, it's looking at Puerto Rico and saying if it happens there, it's not going to happen in the U.S. We're also looking at regionalization because at least in Europe, a lot of countries are saying, well, it's in our feral swine population, but it is not in our domestic swine. And if that holds true, there's less wrangling necessarily from country to country. Unfortunately, when ASF gets into a domestic population, then that goes out the window. And so there's still a tremendous amount of discussion, even between countries, with Canada, with Mexico, with Europe, the European Union. It's still all underdeveloped, and things change depending on how country status changes.